Hello.
Please, shall we all rise? Thank you. Please be seated. That was the Ghana Dance Ensemble ushering our dignitaries to the stage for us. Thank you very much for being here. We want to welcome all of you, and today we are very privileged to have the two pro-vice chancellors here in our midst. We are fortunate to have Sir Sam Jonah in our midst. We are fortunate to have former vice chancellors. We have Justice Henrietta Mensah-Bosu, Justice of the Supreme Court. We have the Ghana Academy, the president, and members of the Ghana Academy. We welcome all of you here and our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today is the second Kwame Gyekye Memorial Lecture, the lecture which has been instituted, one part to honor Emeritus Professor Kwame Gyekye, to discuss his ideas and to see how his ideas fit into contemporary discourses. And today we are very privileged to be talking about Galamsey, but from the perspective of Professor Kwame Gyekye. So thank you all for coming. And to do the official welcome, we'll invite the Dean of the School of Arts, Professor Wazi Apo, to do the welcome address and to introduce our chair for today's occasion. Shall we give a round of applause to Professor Wazi Apo?
Thank you, Able HOD of the Department of Philosophy and Classics. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I stand on the protocol already observed in terms of the big names mentioned earlier on. I also welcome you cordially to the University of Ghana, the finest in Africa, and the university of choice in the world. I also bring you greetings and blessings from the Vice Chancellor, Professor Nana Piamfu, and my powerful Provost of the College of Humanities, Professor Yaro, is here. singling him out because the department that is hosting this occasion is from the College of Humanities and also from the School of Arts. So by way of education, the School of Arts is an integral school in the College of Humanities, and it is made up of the Department of Archaeology and Heritage Studies, the Department for the Study of Religions, Department of History, and the Department of Philosophy and Classics. I must commend the head of department, Dr. Kwesi, the faculty and staff of the Philosophy and Classics Department for being resilient and consistent in organizing this memorial lecture in honor of their legend, or one of their legends in the department. The Kwame Gyekye Memorial Lecture series has come to stay in the annals of the department and by extension that of the school and the University of Ghana. The well-chosen topic or theme titled Coloniality, Citizenship, and Galamsey for this second memorial lecture is appropriate. This is because these issues keep resounding in our homeland and communities today. The lingering forms of neocolonialism being subtly reinforced through dependency on international aid and loans, questions about citizenship, personhood, and our patriotic aspirations all need further interrogations as they pertain to the hydra-headed problems being posed by Galamsey to our water bodies, environment, health, and mental wellness within our communities. These can no longer be glossed over by intellectuals. I believe Professor Cesar Turi will do justice to these problematic issues. That's the second Kwame Gyekye lecture, and his legendary writings gives intellectuals the chance to critically analyze these real-time problems. And besides educating the audience and populace, I strongly believe that some gem of truths and recommendations will be fostered to inform governmental policies that will kneel to our collective benefits. To conclude my welcome address, I would like to mention that a glance through the program outline shows that we are not only going to enjoy the memorial lecture, but we'll also get the chance to own copies of a book that is going to be launched, and we will also get to know about a foundation that will be launched to keep propagating Kwame Gyekye's good thoughts, discourses, and legacies. We are indeed thankful to the organizers and sponsors for these laudable initiatives. Thank you. The next task on my plate is to introduce a chair that will drive the affairs of this occasion, and I'm honored to do so. For such an august occasion, we need a seasoned scholar and statesman to chair affairs. The astute personality I'll be calling on is a Professor Emeritus of Chemistry and former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ghana. He was educated at the University of Ghana and Churchill College, University of Cambridge, UK. He is a life fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry, the Ghana Chemical Society, and a fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, for which he served 2 terms as a Vice President for the Sciences. Since retiring as a Vice Chancellor 22 years ago, he has been researching and mentoring undergraduates, graduate students, and early career senior members in these and other institutions, not only in chemistry, but in other disciplines, including education. He also served on several national and international boards and committees, including the National Development Planning Commission, the World Health Organization Expert Committee on Quality Assurance of Medicines, as well as the African Advisory Committee on Health Research and Development of the WHO. In October 2024, he was unanimously elected in absentia by the Citizens and Diaspora Directorate of the African Union to chair the Committee for the publication of the 4th edition of the Encyclopedia Africana, founded by Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois in 1963. Above all, our proposed chair is a strong advocate for the underprivileged and gender equity in education. He has several awards and honors to his name, including the State Honor of Companion of the Order of the Voter. With an applause, let's welcome Emeritus Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah to give an address. So, Emeritus Chair, your audience, your chair. Thank you.
Distinguished guest speaker, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Registrar, former Vice Chancellors and Registrars, former Pro-Vice Chancellors, Provosts, Deans, members of Convocation, His Lordship, Justice Yoniko Lindi, who is supposed to be with us. I don't know whether he's arrived yet. Sir Sam Jonah, distinguished invited guests, students, ladies and gentlemen. We are gathered here today for the second in the series of lectures in honor of a very distinguished scholar, a scholar whose academic interests started from history to Arabic studies and eventually to philosophy. A scholar with very wide and varied interests who, according to his own frequently narrated account, would have been a scientist, but for the fact that in Form 3 at Mfantsipim, even though he was very good in chemistry and mathematics, he could never get his head around photosynthesis in biology. He loved telling the story of how his white biology teacher would come to the classroom every day with leaves of various plants and going on and on and on about photosynthesis, and assuming that everybody in the class was in tune with her. The method of teaching was so boring and put Professor Gyekye off biology and eventually even from the sciences. In the end, he lost interest in both biology and science. Indeed, in his latter years as a scholar and a philosopher, he spent a lot of time probing scientific issues from a philosophical angle, constantly advocating not only for the inculcation of humanities into sciences, but even more importantly, of the sciences into the humanities, a point of view I fully shared with him. I had a privilege and opportunity to work with him on several projects and assignments during his lifetime. When he was the Vice President for the Arts of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, I was the Vice President for the Sciences, and we worked together harmoniously with our President, Nana Susubribi Krobia Asante, on several cross-cutting assignments and programs. There was only one task that Prof. Gyekye and I declined to undertake as vice chairman. Whenever there was a major official function to be chaired by the president of the academy, Nana Susubribi, he preferred to enter the auditorium accompanied by his royal retinue. Nana requested that we join his retinue of royalty during such processions, but Gyekye and I pleaded with Nana to be exempted from this chore, because we did not see ourselves as royal enough to be part of the Asokore Mahine's royal acolytes. We could even be accused of breaching Asante royal norms. Being an Nzima with Cape Coast antecedents, I was very sure I would be excused from any breach of Asante custom. But of Gyekye and Achim from Achiase, I was not too sure. So the two of us mutually agreed that Nana should excuse us from that particular function. I worked with Kwame on the planning and execution of the Ghana at 50 lecture series in 2006 and 2007. His Excellency President Gyekye set up a committee in 2006 to plan a series of lectures in commemoration of Ghana's 50th independence anniversary, with Prof. Gyekye as the sole member of the planning committee. Kwame requested Professor S.N. Wood and me to assist him in carrying out this difficult but onerous task pro bono. Knowing the sort of hard-working and selfless person that Kwame was, we were sure that it would involve a lot of pressure and a great deal of pleasure as well to work with him. We willingly agreed to help. It was a difficult and time-consuming task, but eventually we put together a very impressive array of speakers, which included His Excellency Mr. Kofi Annan, Professor Yao Safo, Mr. J.H. Mensah, Professor Kofi Kumado, and Professor Mariani Ramadi. Others were Lawyer Reginald Bannerman, Professor Ali Mazrui, Ambassador K.B. Asante, Professor J.O.M. Pobi, Professor Yantia Mwabedu, Professor Kwame Gyekye himself, and me. The lectures took place from January to December of 2007. The first lecture was by His Excellency Kofi Annan. The climax was the last day's symposium on Ghana, 50 years hence. The panel for this was limited exclusively to persons born after independence. They were Lawyer Yoni Kulendi, Dr. Nanekua Anyidoho, Mr. Emmanuel Deytumi, and Miss Nancy Miles. 20 years hence, Yoni Kulendi is a Supreme Court judge, and is supposed to be with us here today. Nanekua is a professor of the University of Ghana. I'm not too sure of the whereabouts or status of Nancy and Deytumi. Kwame and I edited the manuscript of the entire series for publication as a book in less than a year after the lecture series. To have planned the lecture series, executed the plan, given one of the lectures himself, edited and published the proceedings with the assistance of only 2 other colleagues, all in less than a year after the events, and with no official honorarium, is indeed a clear sign of the type of intellectual giant that Kwame was. Kwame and I were involved in the first Science and Technology Forum held in 2004. Sometime in 2003, Prof. Bene, Prof. Gyekye, Professor S.K.B. Asante, and I met at Prof. Bene's residence and decided to organize a national forum to discuss the issue of science and technology in national development. Incidentally, although Kwame was a historian, Arabic scholar, and philosopher, very few people were aware of his passion for science, in spite of being discouraged from pursuing that discipline by photosynthesis. We constituted ourselves into a planning committee with Prof. Bene as the chairman. Although Prof. Bene was our official chairman and attended all our meetings, he delegated Kwame Gyekye to chair the meetings and also coordinate all our activities. We organized a highly successful national forum from the 15th to the 19th of March 2004. The keynote address was delivered by His Excellency President Gyekye under the chairmanship of Professor Alex A. Kwapong. The opening address was by Honorable J.H. Mensah. The deliberations from the forum were also published as a book, Harnessing Research, Science and Technology for Sustainable Development in Ghana. In 2005, barely a year after the conference, the book was published. When I accepted the invitation to chair this year's Gyekye Memorial Lecture, I wondered how philosophical the selected topic was likely to be. I wondered whether it was going to be a discourse on some of Gyekye's groundbreaking philosophical ideas. I expected something like an examination of Gyekye's critique of Menkiti's conception of personhood, whatever that means. The eventual chosen title came to me as a big surprise. Coloniality. Yes, as opposed to colonialism, there are philosophical underpinnings to these two words and what they mean, just like the current public debate about constitutionality and constitutionalism. Citizenship. Yes, that concept is amenable to philosophical, legal, and intellectual discussion, especially in a country where the determination of what constitutes citizenship and by which document, whether by passport or by birth certificate, can go all the way up to the Supreme Court. But Galamsey, what could be philosophical about Galamsey? Science, technology, sociology, psychology, economics, and probably human attributes such as greed and avarice. Yes, those could be envisaged. But philosophy, well, we are here today to listen to how these three words are philosophically intertwined. Maybe by the end of this lecture, the Vice Chancellor may declare that henceforth, every student passing through Legon must have a taste of philosophy, at least one of its most important areas, logic. And this is a move that I will fully endorse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Adai Mensah, for agreeing to chair this occasion. If you're joining us, you are most welcome. I would like to acknowledge again two Pro-Vice Chancellors here with us. For those of us who don't know them, we have the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Students and Academic Affairs, Professor Gordon. I wonder if you can just wave. We also have the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Development, Professor Felix Asante. And we also have the Registrar in our midst. If Madam Registrar can also wave. Yes. And we have the members of Professor Kwame Gyekye's family, the wife, daughter, and children. Can you also wave? So family members. And then we have the members of the Ghana Academy. We have our two provosts here with us, the provost for the College of Humanities, in which the philosophy department is located, Professor Yaro. And then we have the provost for the College of Health Sciences, Professor, did I forget it? Professor Yosin, if you can also wave. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. We're going to have a short interlude, and that is going to be performed by Ruth Texan. Ruth Texan is going to sing a song that is titled To God and Country. Shall we enjoy the performance by Ruth Texan?
To God and country we lift up our hearts. Oh Ghana, dear Ghana, the gateway to Africa, where God first met us and He gave us our homeland. In return we worship Him as He prosper our land. We remember your sanctuary. We remember Gyekye. We remember Kwame and praise God for all.
Thank you very much, Ruth Texan, for that wonderful performance. Now we get into the reason why we're here, to listen to the talk on citizenship, coloniality, and Galamsey. To introduce our guest speaker is a professor in the philosophy department who is also a member of the Ghana Academy of Arts and was the first guest speaker for the first Kwame Gyekye Memorial Lecture. Shall we welcome Professor Martin Odeje to do the introduction of our guest speaker?
I think enough have been said in terms of welcoming you all, so I would rest on the oars of what has been done already. I think that amongst those of us gathered here on the podium to speak, I have the least onerous of the tasks. The task is just to introduce Caesar, the speaker, and I think this is the least onerous amongst what the other speakers have to do, because not only because it's just a brief introduction of the person who's coming to speak, but also because I've known Caesar since he joined our department the past 11 years, and I don't consider Caesar just as a colleague, I think of him as my brother. And, we will all agree that introducing a brother to a general public shouldn't be the most difficult thing for anyone to do. So, our speaker here, before I go to tell you about his current academic engagements and interests, I want to just say that he's just one of two people who have had a remarkable journey, people who have been associated with our department, the Department of Philosophy and Classics. I mean, it was a department of philosophy alone before it was conjoined with classics. And I'm alluding to the similarities of his academic journey with Kwame Anthony Appiah. Many of you here would know of him as one of the most illustrious and acclaimed philosophers from Ghana. And the similarity that I want to allude is that Kwame Appiah and Caesar Toure are just the two people who have worked in our department that abandoned the study of applied sciences for the delightful severity of philosophical inquiry. So Kwame Appiah left medical studies and just joined the inquiry into fundamental philosophical questions, and so did Caesar do that, who abandoned studies in engineering at Imperial College in 1990 for the delights of philosophical studies. And there is no doubt, judging by the work that he is currently doing, that he will achieve the same acclaim as Kwame Appiah has done. So Caesar is a philosopher and a public and a health ethicist who is currently an associate professor in our department, and he is also the lead for the Ethics and Governance MSc Studies in International Health and Tropical Medicine at the University of Oxford. He doubles at Oxford as the Director of Global Health, and he's also an adjunct professor of philosophy here. Well, is an associate professor, actually. I'd say associate professor, but not adjunct. He is also affiliated with the University of Washington, their Department of Bioethics and Humanities, and he's also the president of the International Association of Bioethics. He's been president for 2 years now, and is holding the position until 2026, until next year. In terms of his publications, I will just mention the seminal ones, which for me, I think are 2 books. One of them is a 2019 edited volume on bioethics in Africa. And just this year, with Professor Nancy Gyekye of the University of Washington, Caesar's published a whole book on personhood. The title is What is a Person? Untapped Insights from Africa. I recommend those of you who are interested in both the ontology and the ethics of personhood, I would recommend this book to you without reservation. In fact, we just completed a symposium on the book that was held yesterday and today, and the level of discourse and the insights that we benefited from in the deliberations are just mind-boggling. So that is the very current, latest of Caesar's books. I know that he is working at least on one more. Probably he will tell you about that himself. In terms of academic projects too, apparently it's a record for humanistic studies here at this university. Caesar has been awarded the largest grant for studies in humanities in the history of the University of Ghana, if I remember right. And this is a study to explore conceptualizations of solidarity, to design a solidarity index for ranking global health funding, for ranking the governance of global health. So at a conceptual level, this is what he's doing. He's also worked in several essays on concepts underlying and informing bioethics by drawing philosophical ideas from Africa and from non-African thought in order to address the inequity in the relationships that govern approaches to global health. Caesar is a member and an affiliate of very eminent scholarly associations. He is a member of the WHO's COVID-19 Ethics and Governance Working Group. He's a member of the steering committee of the Global Forum for Bioethics in Research, a board member of the International Association of Bioethics, and a member of the CDC-linked Working Group on African Frameworks for Research in Ethics. Aside all of this, he still finds energy to direct an NGO that operates in health care and basic education, and to offer vocational training skills to the needy here in Ghana. So Caesar's work does not just straddle conceptual and empirical interests, but he also works with improving the conditions of the least advantaged of societies in Africa. I give you Caesar Galamsey Ature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for this kind introduction. And I just want to start by saying, friends, Legonites, countrymen, I come to bury Galamsey and not to praise it. But then there's a line that follows, and it says, the evil that men do lives after them, but the good is often interred with their bones. So, the greetings and appreciations of all the dignitaries present and everybody present has been done, so please allow me to go directly into the subject matter of this lecture. Artisanal mining and small-scale mining is a source of livelihood for many Ghanaians and an important contribution to our economy. The data we have tells us that up to 1 million people in this country are involved in artisanal mining. And if we multiply that by the families that these people have, we can even talk about 5 million people. If Ghana exports 1.5 million ounces of gold per year, nearly a third of that, 500,000 ounces, comes from artisanal and small-scale mining. Now, if gold is going on the international markets at $3,000 per ounce, you can imagine how big that money is. Roughly half of what our governments have gone to beg IMF for to save us. So what we have here is something that is hugely important in terms of the employment it generates and in terms of the economic fallout of this. However, there is another side to the problem. And that other side says, irresponsible mining activities pose an existential threat to lives, health, and the environment. Notice I haven't said Galamsey poses an existential threat. I said irresponsible mining activities, which means that the threat to the environment is linked to all activities of mining. Some to a greater extent and others to a lesser extent. This is the problem that we're dealing with, and we need to diagnose it well. Also, within that point, I make the claim that it raises, that is, mining activities, it also raises important ethical issues about intergenerational justice. And intergenerational justice simply means, what sort of Ghana do we want to leave for future generations? Now, there is a beautiful poem by Kofi Awono, which most of you are familiar with, the Songs of Sorrow, which begins, Jogbezeliza has treated me thus, he has led me to the sharps of the forest. Returning is not possible, going forward is a great difficulty. The affairs of this world are like chameleon faces onto which I have stepped, and when I cleanse they do not go. But there is an interesting part to this poem. Towards the end of it, Awono talks about how the future generations, or how the present generations look on past generations. And if we take seriously what Awono says, then this may be what the future generations will say about our generation. And I quote, Agosi, if you go tell them, tell Nyidevu, Peti, and Kove that they have done us evil. Tell them that their house is falling, and the trees in the fence have been eaten by termites, and that martels curse them. Ask them why they idle there while we suffer and eat sand. And the crow and the vulture hover always above our broken fences. And the last line is important, it says, and strangers walk over our portion. So, unless we address these problems that we're dealing with today, these words may be attributed to our generation by the generations that will come after us. So there is an issue of intergenerational justice here. Now, public opinion has been mounting, and you can see that from the image on the screen, mounting pressure on government to address the human and environmental costs of artisanal and small-scale mining, especially Galamsey. Governments have tried to respond with various operations Operation Vanguard, Operation Flashout, Operation Blue Waters. The series of operations that we've seen are numerous. We will try to analyze what is going on, why with so many operations we are still where we are at. So this is what we can say our place in life. I mean, in German, sort of like exegetes say, our Sitz im Leben. This is our place in life. We have wealth, which is gold. We have gold mining that is destroying our environment and risking the future of this country. And people are angry. And everyone is asking government, do something. And Galamsey, stop it. It is not happening. So, this leads me to the next slide. This lecture, which is the second Kwame Gyekye Memorial Lecture, is a service. As academics, we have the duty to unpack issues, try and see whether we can put some reasoning into them. That's what we do in philosophy. And perhaps through this to be able to offer possible solutions. So when we are critical, and I will be critical, it is not because we are against anybody in particular, but it is because it is our job to do so. It is our duty. That is why Ghanaians have educated us, and that is what Ghanaians pay us to do. And we will be forfeiting our duty if we do not do that. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to interrogate the root causes of Galamsey through a diachronic and synchronic problem diagnosis. That is over time and how it is today. Secondly, we're going to suggest a reframing of the problem of Galamsey, drawing on Kwame Gyekye's moderate communitarianism for policy framing. And third, we will propose a natural resources consensus framework for addressing the challenges posed by Galamsey and other activities, drawing on what I call a decolonial framework. So this is what we'll try to do in the next 30 minutes or so. This exercise is what Kwame Gyekye would call critical Sankophaism. We are all familiar with Sankofa, which is, go back and get it. The bird goes back and tries to dig from the past in order to inform the future. And in a lecture at a conference, a workshop actually organized by Professor Martin Ajay, my brother here who introduced me, and Professor Catherine Flickshoe, who were here on normative discontinuities. Kwame Gyekye spoke about the idea that it is important to go back into the past, but like the Sankofa bird, which is moving forward, it also has the capacity of spitting out rotten seed from the past. Thus, critical Sankofa is not a mere exercise of cultural revivalism, but a critical engagement with the past to learn for the present and the future. So this is the exercise that we're trying to do. Now, here you have 4 nouns and 4 images. I'm going to try to say something here. The first is Ghana. As you're all aware, this country that we call Ghana has borrowed the name from the medieval kingdom, which ended around the 10th, 11th century, that was called Ghana. But that country was not even here geographically. It was more towards Senegal and Mali. But what is interesting is that foreign commentators about the ancient empire of Ghana had this to say. About the king of the ancient kingdom of Ghana, it says, the king adorns himself like a woman, wearing necklaces around his neck and bracelets on his forearms, and he puts on a high cap decorated with gold, wrapped in a turban of fine cotton. He holds an audience in a domed pavilion around which stand 10 horses, gold-embroidered materials. On his right are the sons of the vassal kings of his country, wearing splendid garments and their hair plaited with gold. At the door of the pavilion, dogs of excellent pedigree. Round their necks, they wear collars of gold, studded with a number of balls of the same metal. In other words, this was written by an Arab commentator of the 10th century. The perception of Ghana is the country of gold, the land of gold. Now, let's move away some 300 to 400 years down the road when Europeans first entered into contact with this part of the world. As we know, the first settlement was with Diego da Zambuja and Fernão Gomes when they actually arrived in around 1471 and established themselves in what today we call Elmina. Why did they call that town Elmina? Elmina is simply a Portuguese derivation of the mine, Amina. Therefore, even their presence here was because gold trade was thriving. And if you read the early commentaries, it was all about how they could get gold and gold dust from this part of the world. The wars of succession between the Portuguese in the 15th century and the 16th century, the Dutch in particular, were simply struggles between European powers to gain greater access to the gold that was being produced in this territory. And remember that gold was actually produced through small-scale and artisanal mining. Now, of course, Elmina, the gold trade then subsided because in the 17th and 18th centuries it became more lucrative to sell human beings. So the slave trade took over. But then what we noticed is that when the colony was created by the British, they didn't call us Ghana, they didn't call us the land of the black people or the land of the Akan, they called us the Gold Coast. In other words, the people were not so important, it was the gold. We were the Gold Coast, and we were that way until independence. And when we gained independence, even in our flag, we still have the symbol of gold. In other words, what Professor Ayisi says is that gold is in our DNA. We have to learn how to engage with this resource that we have so that it does not become something that damages us, but something that can actually be helpful towards us. And we have always had a problematic relationship with gold, but gold is in our DNA. We can't run away from it. So, having said this, there has been a lot of research, Hilson and others, on 1,000 years of history of gold mining in Ghana. But for the sake of brevity, I just want to stop from the colony, so around 1820, until all the territories were formed, up until our time. And I do not want to be terribly tedious, but just to mention from or maybe let me just mention a few things before I move to the 1900s. I mean, the figure of Yasantewa that is so important to us was what was at the core of the problem? In the Ashanti Wars, when the British eventually managed to defeat the Ashantis, if we may say so, what did they do? They demanded the golden stool. And it was because of that Yasantewa stood up. So even in those struggles, John Mensah Saba had to spend a lot of time trying to interpret the colonial land laws in order to be able to help defend the Aborigines' rights. Now, if we take from 1900 to 2025, that is from 125 years, the interesting thing is that if we go around counting the number of laws, ordinances, major policies that have been issued to regulate gold mining in this country, we can come up with at least more than 25 important policy documents that try to regulate gold mining in this country. And if after 25 years in 125, that is one every 5 years, we still haven't gotten our act together, then maybe we are asking the wrong questions, or maybe we are misdiagnosing the problem. Now, having said that, there is something that I just want to mention. So in the colonial period, especially from 1900, because around 1900, and we have one of our colleagues here from South Africa, Professor Kevin Behrens, there was the Boer War. And therefore, South Africa, which was the competitor of Ghana or the Gold Coast in terms of gold production, was not a very fertile, was not a very fruitful place to engage in gold extraction. So a lot of attention of the colonials was turned towards Ghana. And we see an increasing number of ordinances by the colonial authorities to be able to grasp and take over the production of gold from the local population. And this was done through several ordinances. For example, the Mercury Ordinance of 1936, which basically prohibited natives from importing gold or even from mercury or from trading in mercury. And it got to a point that they were even saying that to be able to have a concession to use mercury, you had to be illiterate and capable of reading the English language. So, by mounting the pressure, the colonials created a system whereby the colonial government was basically taking and subtracting power of the indigenous population so that gold will be vested and the whole of the gold trade will be vested in the colonial authorities. Ado Framing writes, until the mid-19th century, the mining in the Gold Coast was an exclusively African activity. But European capital soon turned the industry into a European monopoly. By the 1930s, extensive tracts of auriferous land had passed from the hands of the rural population to those of European private investors. The role of Africans was reduced from that of entrepreneurs to that of unskilled laborers. The chief's complaints to the governor were dismissed, and there was collusion between the colonial government and the European concessionaires to use legislation to exclude rural Africans from participation in an industry that had been their main business until the 1880s. So, this was the colonial era. Now, if we move I'm going to take this in very broad brushes. If we move to the independence, the post-independence era, what Kwame Nkrumah tried to do was basically, the underlying principle was, let's take back control of the gold production in the country. But he did so by trying to nationalize and even buying off some of the foreign companies that were extracting gold in this country. However, Kwame Nkrumah, to some extent, within the legal framework within which he was working, still stayed, and I would argue this, within the colonial paradigm, because he says, mineral riches are vested in the president. The president, subject to this act and any other enactment, may, after holding such inquiry as prescribed, by the compliances, give licenses for prospecting minerals, dredging rivers, streams or water courses, winning or obtaining minerals from any land. So what we're seeing is a sort of subterranean sovereignty that we are establishing in the hands of government. Ghanaians can own land and what is on top of it, but what is under its government. So, one may argue, and we will see, that yes, there was some form of return of the ownership to Ghanaians from the colonial era, but that retainership stayed in the hands of central government and not in the communities. And the same paradigm is repeated in the... So, after the Nkrumah era, there was poor investment after the nationalization and sometimes mismanagement in the governments that followed after Nkrumah, to such an extent that in 1960, I think Ghana was producing something like about 900 to 1,000 ounces of gold a year, and by 1980, this had dropped to something like about 300,000 ounces. So, during the EAP, the Economic Adjustment Program, part of the recommendations of the IMF and World Bank that were assisting Ghana in the 1980s were that the government of the then PNDC should make Ghana an attractive destination for foreigners to come and invest in the gold industry. So we generated the 1986 Mineral Acts, which actually does not even speak about artisanal mining and very little about small-scale mining, to create a destination that was favorable for foreign companies to come in and invest so that government can then reap profits through the activities of these foreign companies. And these foreign companies came in using a model of enclavism and rentierism. I will explain these terms later on. Now, all the subsequent laws, the 2006 and even up to the most recent 2005, none of them has ever actually questioned whether this model that we've inherited from the colonials, who gradually subtracted the ownership and the centrality of communities from the gold industry and placed it in the hands of central government, nobody has ever questioned this. In 2012, there was some discussion to return something to the communities, and there is a formula for doing so. But the formula is so complex and even so difficult to police and to ensure that it is working, but not very well. So, if we just take this, what I would like to say this evening is that a lot of the issues that we're facing today are a result of poor stewardship. Now, this poor stewardship can be characterized by one, extraversion, and I'm not misspelling extroversion here. Extraversion, this is a term that was originally coined by Samir Amin, Marxist Egyptian decolonial scholar, and then later on Paulan Huntanji and others also took up the term. The idea is when you create a system whereby you are always looking outside instead of looking inside. So this is very common, even not only with gold, but with many other African natural resources. As soon as we see that there is a natural resource, we're looking for how can we get foreigners involved in this. And it is always about, how we kind of measure ourselves by the foreign gaze. And this has been extremely present in the way we have managed our natural resources. And by the way, there are many economists in this room. If we want to count countries that have just developed themselves and made their citizenry better by simply selling natural resources, there are very few, apart from maybe the Arab countries. There's much more to it than that. Yet, that was the model that was generated, and quite often we're still operating on the same model. The second aspect of poor stewardship is the alienation fueled by enclavism and rentier models. So the enclavism is we grant a big concession to a big company. It creates an enclave in a certain part of the country and pays rent and dividends to the government. There's no local ownership, and the locals can simply work in there as, manual labor. And what is more, we even create models to defend the mine against the locals. So it's just an enclave within the country, and sometimes even the communities, the better of communities that live around the mines live very well. And yet the people who are working in the mines are poor. So there is no interaction really, there's no serious engagement. Now, this results in dispossession of the people because the people no longer feel that this is theirs, it's been taken over. And when this is accompanied by poor benefit sharing, because people are not seeing the returns, then this generates a type of feeling that is accompanied by what I call coloniality. So now we move to the concept of coloniality. What is coloniality? To start with, I'm going to talk about, and Prof in his introduction wanted to see how these things link up. coloniality, to understand coloniality, we must understand colonialism. You know, the Brits or the French were not the first to invent colonialism. I mean, the Romans had colonies, and the colonus within the Roman system was basically a system whereby you occupy somebody else's land, use their population to feed Rome. Rome was a big empire. Rome has no natural resources, and Rome needed to be fed, and fed well. So, the specific moral evil or moral wrong of colonialism is this: it is the subtraction of agency, of political agency and social agency of a people, the subtraction of the agency of self-determination. So you move into an area and you subtract the capacity of that particular community to self-determine. Quite often people think that the era of colonialism is because of the stealing of resources, slavery, and all that. Yeah, those things are moral wrongs. But you can actually commit those moral wrongs without necessarily colonizing. The specific moral wrong of colonization is the subtraction of political agency of a community. That is why there cannot be any good colonizers. Because once you engage in that activity, it is a moral wrong. Now, Kwame Nkrumah realized this, and after independence, he warned Africans of what he called neocolonialism. In that book, in the 1965 book, Kwame Nkrumah writes, the title of the book is Neocolonialism as the last stage or the highest stage of imperialism. Now, Nkrumah was actually creating a continuity between another book that Lenin had written, which was Imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism. So he took from imperialism and then said neocolonialism is the highest state of imperialism. But what Nkrumah says in that book is the fact that the way he defines neocolonialism is about external forces not being present but controlling the resources through capital and through knowledge of a people that in theory has become independent. However, I would like to push that further because while neocolonialism refers to the external forces, there is another way which has been developed by the Latin American scholars, people like Aníbal Quijano, Arturo Escobar, and others, where they talk about coloniality as a way to engage colonialism in the present, anywhere, internally, bilaterally and globally, as a reproduction of extreme power inequality and different institutions created to perpetuate this. These power relations both sanction and invisibilize how they produce premature death, enact violence against and destroy peoples, along with their lives, environments, and knowledge. So, basically, coloniality is the system that allows the colonial structures to continue to perpetuate their activities even in the absence of the colonizer. And to continue to do so, coloniality is premised on three elements. One is ecocide, because the colonies are created in a way that you kill the environment, you kill nature in order to feed the center. So we become primary producers, places of extraction, in order to feed our former colonizers. And what is more, even after years, we still believe that that is our only way to develop because the system of coloniality is still with us. Secondly, coloniality is also premised on epistemicide, which is killing of knowledges. If gold had been traded and extracted for over 1,000 years in this part of the world, where is that knowledge? And why did that knowledge not destroy the environment? But we kill indigenous knowledges. And that is part of the epistemicide that coloniality actually commits. And finally, coloniality generates genocide, but basically people die because the systems are so unfair that those at the receiving end will always die. And therefore, we will use even our gold, and our brothers and sisters will die in the pits, and yet some people will be enriched by it. So, this is the context of how does this play out on the Galamsey scene? And here I want to go on a disambiguation exercise. We sometimes call everything Galamsey. We have artisanal mining. Artisanal mining is basically people with very rudimentary tools who try to get gold from their surroundings. A lot of artisanal mining is actually even seasonal. People who farm during the rainy season, and when they are not farming, they do artisanal mining. That is one. Two, we have small-scale mining, which has now been regular. There are policies to get concessions to be able to carry out artisanal, small-scale mining, where there are some tools involved, but it's not very highly mechanized, which is what happens quite often. We also have bureaucratic problems about simple and ordinary community members who need to get a license or a concession to be able to do small-scale mining, because the amount of bureaucracy and time it will take them is just too much. There are some researchers, some papers that I'll refer to them at the end, that actually involve interviews with people who are engaged in this activity, and they just tell you that, look, we can't. And then we have Galamsey. Galamsey refers to illegal, artisanal, and small-scale mining. So, not all small-scale mining is Galamsey, and not all artisanal mining is Galamsey. Galamsey has been, you see, and the interesting thing is that Galamsey is always being framed according to legality or illegality. But the argument that, and you see, once you frame it that way, you narrow the dimension of the problem. Is it legal or is it not legal? But is it only Galamsey that damages the environment, or can we argue that all forms of mining run the risk of damaging the environment? Now, Galamsey kings, so if you look at the Galamsey terrain, normally we have about 3 layers. On the one hand, we have the Galamsey kings and queens, as I would call them. Those are the people who invest capital into setting up a Galamsey mine. These people quite often are not even locals of the community. They are investors, they are businessmen who are outside, who provide the resources. Second, we have the Galamsey members, managers who would be active members of the community who can recruit and manage the activity. And then lastly, we have the Galamsey workers. And the Galamsey workers, and please do not be scandalized, when I hear about the Galamsey workers, a song from Shatta Wale comes to my mind. You know, when Shatta Wale says taking over, he says, "I am alive, se me Galamsey. My is it na ubebo me away." These are people who are just trying to survive, looking for jobs, and when somebody opens a mine, they go in to work there. They have no ideology. They're just looking for survival. Unfortunately, they are the people who actually bear the brunt of our anti-Galamsey crusades, because we pick those ones up. But it's just like in other jurisdictions, for example, in countries like the US and even parts of Europe, if you say you want to fight drug trafficking and you just pick up the guys who sell loose joints around the corner, you're missing the point. They are not the drivers of Galamsey activity. And so, now we also have another third factor, which is the new foreign influence, which is mainly, as we can see, and the newspapers tell us, mainly the Chinese influence. What do? They are able to bring in tools to make the small-scale mining more efficient, and they situate themselves somewhere between the 3 categories, because there is a demand, and they have found this demand, and now they're moving from not only Galamsey managers to become Galamsey kings and queens. So the terrain is very complex, and not everybody has equal responsibility. Now, What is happening is that I would say government and Galamseyers are caught up in a battle of coloniality. Government which has a monopoly of coercive power, allied with extractivist campaignists, want to get rid of Galamsey. And I wonder whether they want to get rid of Galamsey simply because they care about the environment or they care about their revenues. I'll leave that question hanging. And if it is about their revenues, then this is institutionalized cynicism. If on the other hand, 10 minutes, okay. On the other hand, we have well-meaning citizens who go out on demonstration, including my colleagues here at the University of Ghana. We went on strike to end Galamsey. And yes, let's end Galamsey. But we're more worried sometimes about our environment, natural water bodies, forests. What about our brothers and sisters who are dying in the pits? What are we offering them? They are part of us. And this is where we need to be careful in the way we articulate the discourses, because once we start articulating even our environmental concerns without being interested in the people, then how different are we to those who called us the Gold Coast and forgot about the people who live in this land? Or on the other hand, if we're trying to fight Galamsey simply because it is a nasty competitor, you know, I was having a conversation today earlier, but people can do the right things for the wrong reasons. And when you claim to be doing the right things for the wrong reasons, you always leave many victims on the road. So we need to be careful about that. What I can say is this, and I'm going to run through this part quickly so that I get to the part of the Gyekye framing. Galamsey in Ghana today can be described as a wicked problem. Many of you are familiar with the theory of wicked problems. Wicked problems are ill-defined, malignant. They cannot be solved definitively. Instead, they are dependent on elusive political judgment for resolution over and over again. The table on that is colored shows you what characteristics make a wicked problem. On the second row, we see if we have a problem that is known, but the solution is not known, and then we have multiple actors with conflicting interests and values, we have a wicked problem. And here, I would say, Galamsey has all the characteristics of a wicked problem. Typically, governments respond to wicked problems, one, by an avoidance, denial, and minimalizing responsibility. So it is just these people here who are doing this. We can flush it out, we can contain it. Or you can use coercive control. Let's let the soldiers out on them. Let's let the army out on them. 3, compartmentalized micromanagement. So this is simply a problem of mining and mines, but it is not a social problem. So you address the problem by just compartmentalizing it. Or technocratic problem solving. So create a committee. Or incremental pragmatic judgment, which is just basically who is shouting most, let's satisfy them. These are the 5 inadequate solutions that governments typically give to wicked problems. And we have seen those being enacted with the problem of mining in Ghana. What we're calling for more is a stakeholder collaboration and coping and prevention policies towards a paradigm shift. So this then takes me to the works of Professor Kwame Gyekye. Kwame Gyekye's intuition and what he writes about when he talks about moderate communitarianism is the fact that we are intrinsically communal. We are intrinsically bonded to each other. And therefore, the well-being of the society is intrinsically linked to the well-being of the individual. And the individual's well-being is also linked to the well-being of the society. You can't you cannot separate them. And the community, that is our collective well-being, is not a mere contract or association of individuals. We are tied together. And our fortunes or our failures will also be tied together. Therefore, members of a community society are expected to show concern for the well-being of one another and do what they can to advance the common good, not as an abstract ideology, but the good that is common to individual human beings. So Kwame Gyekye has a nuanced understanding of what is called the common good. People sometimes think of the common good as, okay, let's come together, let's agree what the common good is. Kwame Gyekye is saying that there are certain things that are necessary and good for human beings to be able to thrive, and these constitute the common good. They are not abstract. So if we want to bring it down to very concrete terms, if I'm looking at a poor community where there is gold, I'm looking at people being able to have food, health, education. These are their common goods that will help them to thrive. And therefore, the provision of these goods, or ensuring that these goods are available to these people, is looking for their common good. And therefore, the concept of civil society implies the recognition and existence of a substrate of commonly shared values and self-understandings. The communitarian ethic acknowledges the importance of individual rights, but it does not do so to the detriment of responsibilities that individual members have or ought to have towards the community or other members of the community. By responsibility, I mean a caring attitude or conduct that one feels one ought to adapt with respect to the well-being of other persons, of another person or other persons. It means that, in very simple terms, we need to care for each other and care for our environment, because it is what keeps us together and what we all need to thrive. And therefore, this leads me to the next point. The Gyekyean approach, if we're going to use a Gyekyean approach to tackle Galamsey, the problem then shifts from being a problem of you Galamseyers, you illegal miners, to a problem of we. So what we have here is not a problem of bad people, but it's a problem of all of us and the systems and structures that we have created to be able to govern this. Are these structures adequate? Because as long as we continue to look at this problem and point fingers at other people, and you know what the saying is in our own languages, when you point one finger at another person, how many are pointing at you? All the rest, right? So we need to understand this as a problem that involves all of us. So Gyekye, along with Wiredu, speak quite often, and he speaks, and I'm going to quote this here, about creating processes for consensus. Consensus is vital to democracy, he writes, and allows everyone an opportunity to speak their minds and promote patience, tolerance, and an attitude of compromise. He says, it will serve the purpose of democracy to pay close attention to the formation of town and district councils that will ensure the participation of local people in making decisions that directly affect their lives, as well as engender in the local citizens feelings that they are part of the general political process and on a more daily basis, and not only at the time of general elections. So, this leads me to the penultimate slide here. What we're talking about is, the framework is, can we begin to imagine a natural resources consensus? At the beginning, I thought of calling it a Galamsey consensus, but I decided it wouldn't work that way. A natural resources consensus. A natural resources consensus where we can even begin to imagine shared ownership of mining activities with members of the communities. And not only just think, well, what can we do to attract more foreign investors? And it may be slower, but the urgency can also be something that is an excuse not to practice justice. Efficiency is not a reason to ignore justice. Now, but to be able to do that, we will need to. So this is the right slide. Yeah, we will need to think of a form of engagement. And this engagement needs to be quite different to the types of engagement that we have done, because quite often the types of engagement that we use are procedural engagements. But we need to go into a process of engagement that will allow us to tackle the substantive issues that are around the management and the governance of natural resources, especially mining resources in Ghana. And the substantive issues we need to look at are: one, what role do we want the natural resources of Ghana to play in the development of our country? Do we want to be a nation of gather and sell, which is just a nation of Galamsey, on a legal sort of like basis? Or can we imagine something else? Two, who ultimately owns the natural resources of Ghana? Is it right to say that they are vested in the President of the Republic only? Is that justice? I want us to have a conversation about that. And before the colonials introduced these models, what were the traditional models of governance that our communities used to govern the natural resources like mines and golds? And what can we learn from them? And that is this critical sankofa that Kwame Gyekye talks about. We need to go back, because mining of gold is not a new thing. There were systems that were governing it. What can we learn from those systems instead of learning only from the colonial model? And here I'm tempted to crack a joke, but sometimes you look at policies and they look like Obroniwawu policies. And I'll stop there. What Ghana do we want to leave for future generations? These are the substantive questions, and it is only in light of these substantive questions that we can adequately address the procedural questions, which then will make us, and to be able to do this form of engagement, we have to stop thinking of illegal mining just as a legal question, because once we start thinking of it only within a legal framework, then the Galamsey is simply a criminal. And you don't sit down to negotiate with criminals. You lock them up. But we haven't succeeded with that. And so, of course, this will be grounded on models of subsidiarity. I see that my time is running out. And I just want to conclude, I just want to make a proposal, and then I'll go to the conclusion. The proposal is this. The University of Ghana has many departments. We have sociology, we have geography, minerals, everything. I would like to suggest that together with government, we do a pilot study of different models of governance of natural resources in 3 different areas in this country, just small, in order to gather evidence so that our decisions will be evidence-based policies. And I think this can be done. We have people who are qualified here who can do it. And if we do that, we will then test out a hypothesis and see whether this hypothesis can generate results, and then we can correct it before we begin to formulate general rules. Otherwise, in another 100 years, we'll have 50 laws and still be struggling with this problem, except that our river bodies and our nature and our environment will be so damaged that we'll be paying the price. And I want to finish with on a positive note. There is something that, if we follow this model, we can do. And, when this country was born, the founders, and especially Kwame Nkrumah, had a vision. That black star in the middle of the flag is important. The problems of mining, gold mining that we're dealing with in Ghana, are present across the African continent. It's not only a Ghanaian problem. Many African countries are facing the same problems. And if Ghana wants to be the black star, then we should be looking for solutions that we can even help our brothers and sisters in other countries on this continent to be able to solve that problem. So we should take that vocation seriously. And to be able to take that vocation seriously, Nkrumah says in Africa Must Unite, he says, And then that is the discourse where he says, we must unite or we will perish. He says, for this end, Africa needs a new type of citizen, a dedicated, modest, honest, and informed person. A person submerges themselves in service to the nation and humankind. A person who abhors greed, detests vanity, and a new type of person whose humility is his strength and whose integrity is his greatness. Thank you.
Another round of applause. Thank you very much, Professor Achure, for this thought-provoking lecture that you've given us today. I want to acknowledge the presence of a few of our invited special guests. We have in our midst the former Chief of Staff, Honorable Akosua Freba Osei Opare, if you are here. Can we just, with a wave, so we can... Yes. Thank you very much, Madam, for coming. We also have the Head of Department for Public Law, Professor Atupare, who is also here, if you can just wave. And we still have a few deans and directors here. We have the Director for African Studies, if you can also wave, Professor Intewusu. Thank you for joining us. Well, we'll have a short interlude, and the interlude is going to be performed by the Ghana Dance Ensemble. The performance is titled Aze Yilu. There's a question: is it witchcraft? Aze Yilu is a Dangme phrase that means, is it witchcraft? This choreographed piece was culled from one of the works of the Ghana Dance Ensemble in 2022. The piece questions whether it is witchcraft that is causing us to destroy our vegetation and climate, or it is our own human actions. So this piece further raises issues of politics, corruption, floods, Galamsey. So who knows your you syndrome, that kind of thing. That if Ghana must make a headway, we must all come together and confront these issues head on. So is it witchcraft or is it our own making? Ladies and gentlemen, we give you Aze Yilu performance by the Ghana Dance Ensemble. Oh, you can do better than this. Thank you very much, Ghana Dance Ensemble. We're trying to ensure that we... we will have a slight change in the program. We're going to launch the Kwame Gyekye Foundation, which is going to be responsible for hosting and organizing lectures as these. And to do that honor will be Sir Sam Jonah, who is the chairman of Jonah Capital, to do us the honors of launching the Emeritus Professor Kwame Gyekye Foundation. Shall we welcome Sir Sam Jonah?
Our chairperson, my mentor, Professor Ivan Ade Mensah. Our guest speaker, Mrs. Joanna Gyekye, and the children, the grandchildren, they are here. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor for me to stand before you today to launch the Emeritus Professor Kwame Gyekye's Foundation. A foundation which is a testament to the enduring legacy of a towering figure in African philosophy. Professor Gyekye's groundbreaking work has left an indelible mark on our understanding of African thought, culture, and identity. Through this foundation we are launching today, we aim to continue his pursuit of knowledge, critical thinking and inquiry, and of course intellectual freedom. We will strive to promote philosophical discourse, we will support research, and foster a community of scholars who will share his passion for exploring the complexities of the human experience. Ladies and gentlemen, as we embark on this journey, let us all draw inspiration from Professor Gyekye's remarkable life and work. It is my hope that his ideas will continue to guide us towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in our world. Let us continue to ensure that the Professor's Foundation becomes a beacon of intellectual excellence, promoting critical thinking and nurturing the next generation of African scholars and thinkers. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
So Sam Jonah will be joined by the family, the daughter and the wife of Emeritus Professor Kwame Gyekye to unveil just a symbolic plaque that represents the Emeritus Professor Gyekye Foundation. So if you can just unwrap it. Thank you very much. So now that the foundation has been launched, there's going to be an appeal to support the foundation, and the ushers will give us some coupons that we can, or pledge forms that we can actually fill if you want to support the foundation, so the foundation can organize the programs that it has been designed to do. So the ushers will go around and hand us those pledge forms, and you can fill in the details and give it to us at the end of the program. Last year we had the Forgetfulness of Citizenship that was delivered by Professor Martin Odeje, and it's the vision of the department to publish these inaugural lectures. We've been able to publish that lecture into a book, and to help us launch that book is our own Pro-Vice Chancellor for Student and Academic Affairs, Professor Gordon Awandari. Shall we welcome Prof to do the launch for us?
Thank you. Our chair, the Emeritus Professor Ivan Adayamensa, our distinguished speaker, and my friend, Professor Caesar Aturi. I want to also recognize our former Vice Chancellors, the legendary Professor Akila Kwasoya, and Emeritus Professor Clifford Tego. Let me also recognize my sister, Her Ladyship, Professor Henrietta Mensah Bonsu. And let me recognize my senior, the President of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, Emerita Professor Isabella Kwachi, and all the distinguished fellows of the Academy present. I want to recognize my friend, former Provost of the College of Health Sciences, Professor Julius Fobel. I want to especially recognize the family of Professor Gyekye. And I want to recognize our mother, the former Chief of Staff, who was a strong supporter of this university. Thank you very much for coming. Distinguished colleagues, scholars from far and wide, it's a great pleasure to have you all here. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor, I want to welcome you and also thank you for joining us this evening. We've just had an outstanding lecture from Caesar. But as the head of department mentioned, this is the second in the series. Last year we had an equally fantastic lecture from Martin. And the department has taken this great initiative to properly keep a record of these outstanding lectures. And so they've started by putting together Martin's lecture from last year, and subsequently they will do that for what we just heard today. And we are all looking forward to another fantastic lecture next year. So on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and the management of the University of Ghana, I want to present the book. This book has been provided a foreword by Justice Emmanuel Yoni Kolendi, who is a Justice of the Supreme Court that we all know. He was here last year with us. And it was edited by the head of department, Professor Richmond Kwesi. So, the first edition of the Kwame Gyekye Memorial Lectures is now published, and it's my distinguished honor to formally launch the forgetfulness of citizenship. Thank you very much. They are going for only 100 Ghana cedis. Only 100 Ghana cedis. How many dollars is that? $6? $7? So, very affordable. Even students can buy. So we encourage all of you to pick a copy as you leave here and pick a number for your friends and your family. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for coming and have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Provici, for launching the book for us. We'll have a final performance, and then we'll be bringing everything to a close. This will be done by the University of Ghana Jubilee Choir. The University of Ghana Jubilee Choir will be giving us some patriotic songs as the books and the go around. So you have the pledge coupons and the books, and they can bring it to you. The ushers are going around bringing it to members. If you want, you can fill it out, or they can fill it for you. So, Jubilee Choir.
Kaigana, Sufe Unyankupong, Fagana Shenisa, Enuna Uya Man Papa, Enuna Uya Do, Otoma Uman, Enura Nayirishishe, Otoma Uman, Enura Naya, Enuna Uya Man Papa, Enuna Uya Do, Otoma Uman, Enura Nayirishishe, Otoma Uman, Enura Naya, Enuna Uya Man Papa, Enuna Uya Do, Otoma Uman, Enura Nayirishishe, Otoma Uman, Enura Naya, Enuna Uya Man Papa, Enuna Uya Do, Otoma Uman, Enura Nayirishishe, Otoma Uman, Enura Naya. Kama ubiaranti, onyamie, washe Yesu asesnemo, aye isano, amenina, muina kupona yo, lesiasia, aye nadu, aye isano. Kama ubiaranti, onyamie, washe Yesu asesnemo, aye isano, amenina, muina kupona yo, lesiasia, aye nadu, aye isano. Enseni na remu, oboye hubano, esosheni na remu, ochichaji yeno, amenina, muina kupona yo, lesiasia, aye nadu, aye isano. Enseni na remu, oboye hubano, esosheni na remu, ochichaji yeno, amenina, muina kupona yo, lesiasia, aye nadu, aye isano.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jubilee Choir.
Kama ubiaranti, onyamie, washe Yesu asitnemu, aye isano, amenina, muinya kupona yo, yetiasia, aye natum, aye isano. Eseni na remu, oboye hubano, esosheni na remu, ochichaji yeno, amenina, muinya kupona yo, yetiasia, aye nadu, aye isano. Eseni na remu, oboye hubano, esosheni na remu, ochichaji yeno, amenina, muinya kupona yo, yetiasia, aye nadu, aye isano.
A round of applause for Jubilee Choir. Thank you very much. So we are inching closely to the end of today's event, and we'll have the chairperson's closing remarks, and after that we'll have the vote of thanks, and we'll bring everything to a close. So shall we invite Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah to give his closing remarks.
Madam former Chief of Staff, Madam Osea Opare, has been acknowledged by so many other people. But what we all forget whenever she is here is that once upon a time she used to be part of us. Indeed, her whole career in the 70s started from here. So, Madam, you are welcome back to your roots. Prophecy, now that she is unemployed, maybe you can think of finding a place to fit her in. After all, she is still very strong and not retarded. Well, we have heard it all. We have heard the distinguished speaker say everything. Now, if you had any doubt at the beginning how Galamsey can be linked to philosophy, I'm sure your mind has been disabused. After all that you've heard, what more can I say? Let me just conclude by referring to two issues. Over the past few years or few months, we've been bombarded with all the reasons why LI 2462 should be abolished. We've heard the legal issues, we've heard the scientific grounds, we've heard the economic grounds, everything. Today we have been armed with another weapon on which we can stand to call for the repeal of LI 2462. So those who are advocates of repealing that law, thankfully, philosophy has provided us with another weapon. At the beginning of the lecture, the distinguished lecturer was introduced as someone who started from the sciences, but he was taking a degree in engineering at Imperial College before he branched into philosophy. We were given the other example of our own Kwame Appiah, starting as a medical student and ending as one of the most distinguished philosophers that this country has produced. Professor Abraham, we are told, was a fantastic mathematician when he was at Adisada. Anyway, most philosophers actually started as scientists or mathematicians. Talk of Leibniz, talk of Thales, talk of Bertrand Russell. But I've always wondered when it will be possible, at least maybe even for this university, to be able to have courses that can enable people from the humanities to end up eventually in the sciences. Mr. Pro-Vice Chancellor, a few thoughts when you are doing your curriculum development. Time there was when one could come to this university and take a degree in geography and mathematics. When did that die? Indeed, geography used to belong to the Faculty of Science. How can we bring that sort of cross-cutting disciplinary issue back into our mirror? With these few words, let me congratulate and thank the guest speaker for such an erudite and thought-provoking lecture in the second of the series of lectures in honor of a great philosopher, emeritus professor, Kwame Gyekye. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing everything to a close now. I want to acknowledge a few guests, special guests in our midst before the vote of thanks comes. So we have Dr. Raziel Obain Okon, who is the chairman for Sudan, who was also a partner and a sponsor for this program. Doc, can you wait? Thank you very much for coming. Mr. Kimati Kwenye here, if you are here, for Kimati and partners who also sponsored this event. Let me also acknowledge Nana Professor SKB Asante, the Omahini of Asante Asokore, for gracing the occasion for us. Thank you very much for coming. Mr. and Mrs. Walter Zelochi, if you are here, can also wave for us. Thank you for being our honored guest as well. Mr. Akamba Akumbani, if you are here. And then we also have Mrs. Sadia Mould, who is the CEO of Savannah International. Mrs. Sadia Mould, if you are here. Okay. On my list, Dr. Bosman Asare is confirmed to be here. If Dr. Bosman Asare, the Deputy EC, is here, we can also acknowledge you. Thank you very much. So we now have the vote of thanks from Dr. Mame Jechi Jando from the Department of Political Science, and also a daughter, the first daughter of Professor Kwame Gyekye, to do the vote of thanks.
Professor Chairman, Pro-Vice Chancellors, Provosts, and dignitaries, permit me to stand on the existing protocols already established as I extend a very good evening to you all. Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, including our students. I would first like to give thanks and praise to the Almighty God for making this Kwame Gyekye Memorial Lecture possible, this second lecture possible. Thank you all so much for being present today. Your presence has made this lecture a great success. Indeed, it is a great honor to Daddy, to the Philosophy Department, and to the entire Gyekye family. We are profusely grateful to our chairperson for today, Emeritus Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah, for accepting our invitation to chair this auspicious occasion, for gracing us with his presence, and for chairing this lecture superbly. Our warmest gratitude goes to the guest speaker for today, Professor Caesar Ature, for a masterful and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you for availing yourself and for your excellent delivery. Can we give him another round of applause, please? Thank you. A huge thank you to Sir Sam Esson-Jonah for gracing this occasion with his presence and for launching the Emeritus Professor Kwame Gyekye Foundation. We are extremely grateful to you, sir. To our Vice Chancellor and Pro-Vice Chancellors, we say a huge thank you for your great support of this lecture. We are especially grateful to Pro-VC Prof. Gordon Awandare for launching the book from the maiden Kwame Gyekye lecture. Our warm thanks go to officials of government, members of parliament, and justices of our Supreme Court here present for honoring our invitation. And to all our special guests, provosts, and our provost of the College of Humanities is here, We thank him for coming, Provost of the College of Health Sciences. We are being interdisciplinary, isn't it? And to all deans, directors, heads of department, we say a big thank you to you for making time to attend this second Gyekye Memorial Lecture. A special thank you to our Dean of Arts, Professor Wazi Apple, for gracing us with his presence and participation. Thank you also to our registrar and senior management of the university, former vice chancellors. I see Professor Akila Pasoya here. I see Professor C.N.B. Tego as well. And former registrars, Mrs. Mercy Hazel online, fellows of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, University of Ghana faculty members, and the wider academic fraternity, and family members and friends for honoring our invitation. Many thanks to all those who joined online. I'm sure you were enriched by the lecture. Our gratitude also goes to the Public Affairs Directorate, the University of Ghana Computing Systems, the Ghana Dance Ensemble, and the Jubilee Choir. Gratitude to Ms. Ruth Texan, who gave us that amazing singing. Security personnel, our media partners, our ushers, and all those who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, decor, food, etc., to make this event a success. We are indebted to Justice Yoni Kulendi, who wrote the foreword to the first memorial lecture book, and for mooting the idea of a Kwame Gyekye Foundation. The family and the Department of Philosophy and Classics profusely thank our partners for this second Gyekye lecture. Lawyer Kimathi Kwanyehia, who has pledged his support for the first 5 years and beyond, Stanbic Bank and its CEO, Mr. Kwame Asumani, Sidan Group and its CEO, Dr. Razil Obin Okon, Mr. Kweku Bediaku, CEO of the CH Group, and Mr. Samuel Ochri Yali for their generous support. Our heartfelt thanks go to Kimathi and partners for working tirelessly and graciously to facilitate the setting up of the Emeritus Professor Kwame Gyekye Foundation. We are truly grateful, and we sincerely thank all of you who have made pledges to support the foundation, and we urge others also to support. Finally, but not the least, I would like to single out the Philosophy Department, its head of department, Dr. Richmond Kwesi, former heads of department, particularly Professors Martin Odeje and Haskei Majid, and the Philosophy faculty for great mention. We are extremely grateful to them for initiating this great idea of the annual memorial lecture to celebrate our father's life and reflect on his intellectual legacies, and for working tirelessly to make it happen. Many thanks to the organizing committee, ably headed by the head of department, Dr. Kwesi, who also graciously doubled up as the MC for today. In closing, thank you so much to each of you on behalf of the family and on my own behalf for making this second Gyekye lecture a great success. God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the vote of thanks. So we have refreshments, packed refreshments right after we end. And the faculty and our guests, our special guests will have their packed refreshments at the north wing, just right here. And then our students will have it at the Kwapong Quadrangle, just after you come out from the auditorium. So let's take note of that and make sure you take your package before you leave. We have enough for everyone. We'll take the university anthem, and then we'll let the panel up here recess and then we can all leave. So shall we all be upstanding for the university anthem?
Hail University of Ghana, the nation's hope and glory, the place that bears the star of peace and bids us all to do our best. And the great tower of learning, inspire both young and old. May we proceed in unity to uphold the public cause. Arise, O Lagos, defend the cause of freedom. Proceed with truth and integrity to make our nation proud. Arise, O Lagos, defend the cause of freedom. Proceed with truth and integrity to make our nation proud. We ask for strength and wisdom as we climb the hill of learning. May we excel whatever we do as we prepare to face the world with a mind ready at all times and a conscience quick to feel. May we proceed in unity to uphold the public cause. Arise, O Lagos, defend the cause of freedom. Proceed in truth and integrity to make our nation proud. Arise, O Lagos, defend the cause of freedom. Proceed in truth and integrity to make our nation proud. Arise, O Lagos, defend the cause of freedom. Proceed in truth and integrity to make our nation proud. Arise, O Lagos, defend the cause of freedom. Proceed in truth and integrity to make our nation proud.
Shall we all be still upstanding whilst the Ghana Dance Ensemble will recess our panel up here? We'll have photographs afterwards with our special guests right after the recess. So let's take note of that.